Hello everybody, Lotter for Life here, bringing you guys a brand new deck profile. This time around it is over Vampires. Vampires is a deck that I've been having a lot of fun with, playing and testing and stuff. I've played it a few times in my live streams if my memory serves, and it's just a fun deck in general. I don't think it's going to be anything like even like rogue relevant like at regionals, not until we get into a slower format at least. But the deck is a lot of fun just simply to play, and hey, if you want to have a fun deck to play, go ahead and pick up Vampires. Sorry about this deck profile taking forever to get around to doing too. I had everything except for a second Vampire Sucker, and yeah, that's because somebody at my locals has monopolized Vampire Suckers, and the instant anybody pulls one or sells one to the local store, he picks it up as soon as possible, which made it really hard to get Vampire Suckers. And then a 2-week wait for freaking shipping. So yay, fun. Anyways, on to the deck profile. First and foremost, we got triple Vampire Scarlight Scourge. This guy is one of your big playmakers. Anytime he is normal or special summon, you can pay 1,000 life points to special summon one vampire monster from your graveyard. You can only do that once per turn. That's a hard once per turn. That monster that you summon can attack. It cannot attack this turn. That's the big downside to it, but hey, you don't really mind it too much because it's just a big playmaker. And also, generally speaking, you're summoning this guy off of Shadow Vampire, and Shadow Vampire says only the monster he summons can attack, and that's just kind of there. He also has a new effect that every single one of the new vampires has, except for the Xyz monster, to where if he kills a monster in battle, you can take control of that monster at the end of the battle phase. And also, it technically says monsters, so if you kill multiple, you can take control of multiple, but that's not going to happen. So basically, every single one of these vampires that are new from Dark Saviors are Goyo Guardians, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, it's just kind of weird how far we've come, where Goyo used to be at 1, now he's at 3 and nobody plays, and then we got a whole archetype around it having stealing stuff. It's pretty funny. Then we got triple Shadow Vampire. Shadow Vampire is your main playmaker of the deck. Whenever he is normal summoned, you can special summon any vampire from your deck, but however, that monster is the only monster that can attack for the remainder of the turn. Additionally, Shadow Vampire cannot be used for the Xyz summon of an Xyz monster except a Dark Xyz monster, which is kind of annoying, but hey, it's gotta happen. Well, it didn't have to happen, but Konami did it anyways. But anyways, so he's a pretty darn good card. He's a level 5, 2k attack, 0 defense. Pretty decent stats all around, but is really, really good. His effect is not a once per turn, so if you do have a way to summon out multiple of him in a turn, which is pretty easy to do, you get the effect multiple times, but obviously you want to do it a second time, like maybe phase 2 or something, but yeah, I digress. Really darn good card overall in general though. Moving on, we got triple Vampire Sorcerer. So the big thing with Sorcerer is that he has 2 really good effects. Firstly, if he's destroyed by battle or card effect, you can add any Dark Vampire from your deck to your hand, or a Vampire spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. Additionally, if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish it, and then once during this turn, if you would normal summon a vampire monster that needs a tribute, you can do it for, well, without tribute, which is really, really good. Or I believe it's 1 less tribute. It's one of those 2. You can, yeah, normal summon it, yeah, without tributing. So I was right. It's just, it doesn't matter except for in 1 monster case. So I just had to double check. I don't want to give you guys false info. Then moving on, so yeah, he's just really good in general. You mainly use him for the second effect over the first effect. Then we got good old triple Vampire Retainer, as well as also triple Vampire Familiar. These 2 are mirrors of each other. They do basically the same thing. If they are special summoned, you can pay 500 life points, and then for Familiar, search out a vampire monster, and for Retainer, search out a vampire spell or trap card. Really good cards. They also have another effect where if they are in your graveyard, you can pitch a vampire from your hand or field to the graveyard, and then special summon them from the graveyard. But they get banished, which sucks, but I digress. You gotta go with it. Really darn good cards overall. You absolutely need to be playing like 3 of these guys each. They are your other main playmakers. They get stuff in your graveyard. They get you field advantage. They get you hand advantage. They just go off like crazy and let you do your plays. Really, really, really good support cards for this deck. Their stats are also pretty negligible, so I'm not going to bother mentioning it. Then we got Vampire Grimson. Really weird naming. So he's a level 5, 2k attack, 1400 defense. Like with all of the new vampires, he has the Goyo Guardian effect at the end of the battle phase. But more importantly is if a monster you control or monsters you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can pay 1,000 life points for each of those monsters. So if you have 5 monsters and your opponent tries to Regeki you can pay 5,000 life points and stop that Regeki. Likewise, if your opponent tries to run over something, you can pay 1,000, negate it, so on and so forth. This card is really, really good. You generally want to try and get him out ideally as soon as possible so that you can protect your stuff. But however, obviously you're not always going to be able to get him out. So he's just a really good 2 of. I don't recommend playing 3 of them because he gets a bit cloggy at 3, so 2 is pretty good. Speaking of a card that I severely underestimated initially, Vampire Frowlin. Frowlin is a darn good, amazing card, and I'm tempted to boost her up to 3. Just kind of like, I'm not sure if I want to go with that. 2 has been working really well, but I'm really, really tempted to put it to 3. I want to know what you guys think though, 2 or 3 Frowlin. But, so why is Frowlin so good? Well, she's kind of like a battle fader. Whenever a monster declares an attack, you can spell summon her from your hand. And then, once per each battle, you can pay life points to up to a max of 3,000 to increase the attack of your monster's attack or its defense, depending on which position. I think it actually does both regardless, but anyways, you can pay life points to boost its attack or defense up by that amount. So really, really good card overall. It also has the Goyo Guardian effect, but that's irrelevant. The main thing about her is that she's a really good playmaker. Not to mention, if like your opponent does break your board, which isn't too hard for your opponent to break a vampire's board, you can just summon her on attack declaration whenever your opponent tries to attack you directly, and then she effectively acts as a chum blocker. Anytime they try to attack her, you just boost her up so that she has the same defense as your opponent's attack. So if like they tried to run over her with like a 2,500 monster, you could pay 500. Hey, now she's got 2,500 defense. You don't have to worry about that. But it only lasts, the attack and defense buff only lasts until the end of the damage step, so it just is enough to save your monsters from getting ran over or inflicting minor damage to your opponent, which is kind of cool. So really good card overall. It's a good playmaker, really good for making your vampire suckers, really good for blocking attacks, really good overall. And then we also got one vampire Vamp. I'm kind of tempted to drop Vamp, I'll be honest. Vamp is a good card in certain situations, but a lot of times you just don't either see her or you don't need a reason to see her. I feel like that the instant I cut her though, I'm gonna be like, I need a vampire Vamp, like every single time I play. So what does Vampire Vamp do? Whenever she is normal summoned or whenever another vampire is normal summoned while she's already on the field, you can target one monster your opponent controls that has more attack than her and equip it onto her, and then she gains that monster's attack power. She's basically like a relinquish that can have multiple monsters, but however, it's got to have more attack than her, and that doesn't happen very much. Like generally speaking, you normal summon her out, you take control, you take one monster onto her, and then she's got like 4k plus attack ideally. So she's a really good beater. She's pretty cool about that. My biggest issue with her is that you don't get the effect on special summon. That's the biggest issue. Otherwise, I would be summoning her off of Shadow Vampire more often than I would be Grimson. Scarlet Scourge. And then just sucking up my opponent's monster, make a link, and then there we go. That's the issue though. You don't get it on special summon, you only get it on normal summon. And then one vampire Red Baron. Red Baron is pretty cool, but he's only really good for certain situations. Once per turn, you can pay 1,000 life points, target one monster your opponent controls, and one vampire you control, switch control of them. And then also, of course, he has the Goyo Guardian effect. So really good card overall. The main thing though is that he's like your main out to like big boss monsters that like you normally can't get over, or things that can't be destroyed in battle, stuff like that. Also, it's really trolly to give your opponent a familiar and take their like firewall or something. It's really good for those situations. But however, I don't feel he's good enough to be warranted any more than a 1 of. And maybe if you stretch it as a 2 of, but the creature swap effect is just not relevant enough to where you really do want to play more than 1, I feel. In my experience in general though. Again, I want to hear your guys' ideas, recommendations and stuff, like how I'm offering mine. So yeah. And then one Vampire Lord. I know like Vampire Lord and like all the old vampires from, what was it, Shining Victories or something. I can't remember what that set was called. Oh, Judgment of the Light. That's what it was called. Judgment of the Light with, was when they came out alongside Boojins and stuff. I know like a lot of people don't like those old cards, but I really like Vampire Lord. He's still a fun card to use, and I really like him. If you don't know what he does, you probably haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh! Very long. Whenever he's destroyed by a card effect in the next standby phase, you can spell summon him, and then whenever he does battle damage to your opponent, it's mandatory. You call monster, spell, or trap, and your opponent mills one of those cards of that type that you called from their deck to the graveyard. The thing about that is that it's not as good as it used to be. Back in the day, you'd call spell or trap and pick out your opponent's mirror forces, Regeki, stuff like that, and that would be really, really good, which made him a really good boss monster. It was hard to get over. He just kept coming back if you did kill him, and he just kept on picking cards out of your deck. Nowadays, most decks want stuff in the graveyard. Oh, you called monster. Okay, I'll send my Mizuki to the graveyard. Oh, you called spell. Okay, I'll send my Divine Sword Phoenix Blade to the graveyard. Oh, you called trap. Okay, I'll send my Breakthrough Skill to the graveyard. Obviously, those aren't like the best examples, but like those are the first ones that came to my mind. And not only that, but also like you got like other decks like Sky Striker. They want as many spells in the graveyard as possible. You got like ABC. Oh, you called okay, they'll just send a piece to the graveyard. You know what I mean? Like a lot of decks, they want stuff in the graveyard nowadays. So using Vampire Lord's effect is not as effective as it used to be. But however, I still feel like he's a really good card, especially in certain situations, certain deck matchups, like, you know. And he's even better in the side, well, not in the side, but like in the second game, third game, whenever your opponent starts siding in hate for you and like you know what they're going to call, like they're going to bring in like their Shadow and Poisoning Mirrors or anything like that, you just start calling their spells and traps to try and get rid of the stuff that they sided against you, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I think he's a solid one of. That's my really long excuse for playing him. Moving on to the spells. Triple Vampire's Desire. So Desire is a really interesting card. It's a monster reborn, but it's also a level change. Whenever you activate it, you activate one of the following effects. Either you target one monster you control and then send the vampire from your deck to the graveyard and make the monster you targeted the same level as the vampire that you sent to the graveyard. Or you target one vampire in the graveyard, send one monster you control to the graveyard, spell summon that vampire from your graveyard. Really good card overall. It really plays in the theme of the new ones where they want to take your opponent's monsters and just get rid of them to fulfill your vampire's desires more. I just had to throw that pun in, but it wasn't a good one, I'm sorry. So really good card overall. Very, very helpful. It's a hard once per turn, which is a bit annoying, but oh well. Everything is nowadays. Then we got Triple Vampire's Domain. This card is single-handedly makes the deck with the new stuff. So once per turn, you can pay 500 life points for the remainder of the turn. Even if this card leaves the field, you can normal summon one zombie in addition to your normal summoner set. This makes it very easy to get out Vampire Sucker, to get out your tribute fodder, to then tribute summon for your tribute dudes, and then also. Not only does it have that effect, but also if a vampire does battle damage to your opponent, you gain life points equal to the damage you did. So if you normal summon out like a Grimzin or something and Grimzin attacks directly, does 2k damage to your opponent, you're going to gain 2,000 life points. But even more so than that, that is not a hard once per turn with the life point gaining. So if you have this card out, and heck, it's not even a once per turn at all, period. It's just a continuous effect that triggers every time that you do damage. And if you have multiple of these out, you get multiple amounts of life points. I've gotten myself up to like 20,000 life points just for the hell of it one time while playing this deck. Very, very cool card overall. Absolutely makes the deck as good as it is, which obviously, you know, ain't saying much because the deck's like not super, super good. But I believe that if this deck ever does get like more support, this card is gonna be like one of the biggest central integral pieces to the deck. I mean, who doesn't like free normal summons? Next up, 2 Mind Control. So Mind Control, I've been wanting to find a deck to put it in for a long time. It's a really good card, and this card really helps out vampires quite a bit. So now while you can't tribute the monster that you steal, you can though use it for a Link Summon and Xyz Summon, especially Xyz Summon thanks to Dampier here. So really, really good card overall for this deck. I've seen some people try Brain Control instead. I understand brain control, but my biggest issue is it has way too many restrictions. Yes, it can be useful for taking your opponent's monsters so that then you can then tribute them off if you need be. But however, it has so many restrictions, and in my experience, most of the time my opponent won't have a monster that can be normal summoned or set for brain control to take control of. So mind control is just better in most situations that I have found. So yeah. Moving on, we got 2 Allure of Darkness. I'm not playing 3 because I generally don't want to banish my stuff, but at the same time I really want to have more draw power. So Allure at 2 has been a pretty good medium there for this deck. 1 Monster Reborn just for the extra revival. 1 Monarch Stormforth for tributing off my opponent's stuff. It does kind of suck that you can't make extra plays with this, but that just encourages you to summon Grimson sooner. So yeah. 1 Fool's Burial, and then yeah, that's it for the spells. Pretty solid lineup overall, I think. Unless some of you guys have some interesting tech ideas. Moving on to the traps. First and foremost, let's get it out of the way, the Infernity Barrier, Vampire Domination. And this card is absolutely amazing. It's a Infernity Barrier so long as you control a vampire monster. If your opponent activates a spell trap or a monster effect, you can negate that card and then, well, gain, if it was a monster that destroys the card, and then if it was a monster, you gain life points equal to monster's attack power. Really good card overall. It's a hard once per turn though, which does suck, but I digress. So then also I play triple Vampire Awakening. I know I'm probably going to get some flack for this, but Vampire Awakening is a darn good card. You just activate it, get a free monster on the field. Yes, it kills itself at the end phase, but however, you're still getting free advantage. If you summon one of the little dudes, the familiars or retainers, you get to just bring them back during your turn. And since you special summon them, you get to pay 500 to search. So it's a free search. It gets you pluses. It just helps out a lot. You can use it offensively or defensively, and it's just an overall really good card for this deck. And then, yeah, that's it for the traps I play. There's really not anything else to play in here. If you play Vampire Kingdom, Vampires... what was it called? The trap card that activates Vampire Kingdom directly from deck is an amazing card for this deck as well. I just wish Vampire Kingdom worked a bit better with the new cards because, while it's still a good card, I feel it doesn't work too well with the new vampires. Anyway, so moving on to the extract. First and foremost, I got triple Vampire Sheridan. I'm probably butchering that one way or another. This card is the deck's new boss monster, and by God, is he a boss monster. So he needs 2 or more level 6 monsters to go into. And then also, if you are using monsters your opponent controls, you can treat them as level 6. So that's why I have Mind Control in there. And heck, actually, if you activate 2 Mind Controls and still 2 monsters your opponent controls, and then you can just go straight into Vampire, and your opponent doesn't get those monsters back. You don't even need to use any of your own. A really good card overall, and even just ignoring that summoning effect where just once per turn you can detach an Xyz material, target 1 card your opponent controls, send it to the graveyard, and then you can also detach another Xyz material to then special summon the monster that you sent if it was a monster. So really, really good card overall. Then I got 1 Crimson Knight Vampire Bram. Pretty powerful. This is the old Xyz monster. He's still pretty good in my opinion. Once per turn you can detach Xyz material, special summon 1 monster from your opponent's graveyard to your side of the field that, in defense position. And then also, if he dies by battle or card effect during the next standby phase, he special summons himself from the graveyard in defense position. That is not there's no stipulation behind that, so if your opponent kills him again, he'll just come back. And then again, and again, and again. He just keeps coming back over and over. So not only can he just steal stuff from your opponent's graveyard, which can then, since they were originally controlled by your opponent, you can then use them to summon Vampire. Is just a really, really good card overall. And then also I'm playing 1 number 24 Dragulus, the Vampiric Dragon. One of my personal favorite ranked 6s. He also fits with the theme really well, obviously. He's a worm, he's I wish he was a zombie like the other vampire stuff, but he's not part of the vampire archetype, despite that clearly being the same red moon in the background, but I digress. So he does some pretty cool stuff. Once per turn, you can detach Xyz material, book a moon 1 monster that was supposed to win this turn. Well, not this turn, but you just YgoAmino monster that was special summoned. Then also, if he was foot face up, he can send one card your opponent controls to the graveyard. And then if he was destroyed, or sorry, removed from the field by a card effect while face up on the field, you can special summon him back. It's really, really good card overall. That's it for the XCs I play. Everything else is Links, because, you know, Links have just completely dominated Yu-Gi-Oh! First and foremost, we got 2 Vampire Suckers. That kind of goes without saying. I kind of want to squeeze in 3. You can easily. This deck does not have... this deck has a very open extra deck. You can basically put whatever you want in here. But however, I feel like 2 Vampire Suckers at the very least is absolutely necessary for this deck. Vampire Sucker is by far one of the best links for an archetype out there right now. Obviously, there's others that are much better archetypes, but she just does so much for this deck. Once per turn, you can target a monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it as a zombie monster, and then also once per turn, when a zombie is special summoned from the graveyard, so like for instance the monster you just summoned to your opponent's side of the field, you get to draw a card. So she's kind of like a once per turn, whatever that card was that got banned forever ago that zombies abused to high hell. And then also you can use your opponent's zombie monsters as tribute fodder for your tribute summons of a vampire. Pretty darn good card overall. Really, really, really helpful. Does a lot for the deck, gets you free pluses, and you generally want to try and protect her at all costs. So then moving on, we got 1 Nightmare Mermaid. I know I'm not playing a Nightmare engine, well, the main deck Nightmare, but however, I do got basically the Nightmare engine in here. They are super generic. If your opponent gives you an Ibly, there's not much you can really do with it, so you just sack it off for Nightmare Mermaid, get you a free zone open. Pretty cool. And I also play 1 Goblin for even more extra normal summons, 1 Cerberus for popping opponent's monsters, 1 Phoenix for popping opponent's spells and traps, 1 Unicorn for just getting rid of anything, 1 Triple Burst Dragon for dealing with those pesky Sky Strikers, 1 Nightmare Griffin for getting back my stuff and just being an annoying boss monster, and then finally 1 Surge of Skull Dread, just in case if I need it, and he would help out a lot in certain situations. So just being able to get to draw, fix my hand, get a free spell summon every turn, really great card overall. And then that is Vampires. That's my build that I've been playing. I've been having a lot of fun with it. The deck works really, really well. I've been just absolutely loving this deck. I think I've made that pretty clear. I never thought I'd be a Vampire fan, at least not the Yu-Gi-Oh version of Vampires. I really like this deck a lot. I hope they get more support. What do you guys think of Vampires? Do you think they're good? Do you think they could be potentially a pretty decent rogue deck in the future? What do you guys think? What do you guys think of this build? Please leave your comments down below. I may not always respond, but I do read them. And see you later. Peace out. It was your birthday. Happy birthday. Goodbye.